So what makes knowing this just about the news, that's all they own. There we go. The Dominion Post, the Press, the Waikato Times, Auckland Now, which is not a newspaper, it's a website. The Auckland Herald is owned by APN, who also own the Listener, News Talk, ZB, that whole network, radio network. Yeah, they own the radio network, and that owns half of the big stations, and then I get them wrong, and my husband will tell me off if I've gone there because he's in that area. So, and MediaWorks owns TV3, and then all the opposition to the Herald radio stations. The only independent radio stations in New Zealand, and radio really is the only place you can go to get more balanced opinion. The independent radio stations are the iwi networks, the access radio networks, and national radio. Reason why? Advertisers aren't paying for them at all. Not 1 cent of an advertiser's money goes into those stations. All the money that goes into those stations comes from taxpayers. With the Access network, it may also come from sponsors. So Capital Samoa in Wellington is an Access, works on the Access network. I can't say it's an Access program, but they've got sponsorship behind them. So anyway, we got from in Fairfax, Don Post, Press, Waikato Times, Auckland Now, the Southland Times, Daily News, Manawatu Standard, Nelson Mail, Melbourne Express, and the Timaru Herald. All owned by the same company. So if you were going to be thinking, I'll get a balanced opinion about what's happening, I'll go to the Don Post and the Press, plus the Waikato Times, you're going to get the same opinion. You probably find it's written by the same person. Yeah, Dan?
Also, all the like towns, they're used just for that. They're places, though.
They are newspapers.
Yeah, they're just their places.
They are associated with regions, yes. Yeah. And that's why on
Why would you go to Auckland Now if you look for like?
Because Fairfax doesn't have its own Auckland paper. So in order to have Auckland News, it's got a space for it.
Oh.
And that means on your app you can go to regional news, Auckland News. Where this becomes a really, really heavy, remembering advertisers pay for this, if the newspaper, if something like Fairfax, found out that Coca-Cola, just picking on an example, lied about its sugar content by 3 teaspoons, they may not publish that story because they may actually lose an advertiser. Okay, that's what I meant, that they have to tell you something that's truthful, but it doesn't stop them being biased, and it doesn't stop them choosing to be silent. Very important for you all here and for younger people. Give you an example, the retirement announcement about the superannuation that's meant to be being now raised in 20 years' time. And the argument that all these papers are putting, our politicians are putting out there, is because our population in New Zealand, this is 100% truthful, is growing like that. Our baby boomers, my parents, and some of your parents and some of your grandparents, are coming into their retirement years, and that's a big, they're called baby boomers because when their parents came back from war, all they could think about was sex. They had lots of sex and had lots of babies. So baby boom, big baby boom. But the reality is, retirement is paid by the taxes in the present year. So imagine in 10 years' time, there could actually be more retirees than young people. So who's actually going to start paying for the retirement taxes, and what's going to happen to the country? So they've decided, let's raise the retirement age to 67. But in order to address needs now and in the future, we will raise that retirement age in 20 years' time. We're doing that because of the baby boom coming through. The news, that's all correct, 100% correct. The news that's not being presented is that actually you as a baby boomer are okay. You will still have a retirement. Anyone under the age of 45 will have to pay for their own retirement. That's the news that's not being presented. A couple of reasons for that. We'll sell it as good news for the baby boomers, and the baby boomers, you'll notice, are that the ones that have got money. We have to realise that not all baby boomers have money. There are a lot of baby boomers who still struggle. I'll just finish.
That's why KiwiSaver was good,
Well, I'll just finish.
Yeah.
There's baby boomers who are struggling and everything, but there are those that actually have made a lot of money through the years that don't actually have to worry about paying for their retirement or investing in their retirement at all. But they are the people who vote, not young people. The under 45s don't vote. So the politician present a present, the media presents that present. It's the baby boomers still who are buying newspapers, not young people. So why actually talk about what's going to happen to the youth population in retirement on the front page of a newspaper? In fact, I know I'm an addict to National Radio, but National Radio has something each week called Media Watch, where they go over, and Māori TV, which is the only television station you can really trust as well, because that's taxpayer funded as well. They have Media Take on a Tuesday night, and they go through the week's news as well, and they try to question what's going on and how it was presented. National Radio, when it did its Media Watch in the weekend, said what was really interesting is that when the retirement story was raised, it didn't meet the headlines to any newspaper and to the TV news. It was only when someone asked them questions that it started to get spoken about in the media. And since then we've been talking about it, but at the time there was some other news about a dog or a cat. You know, at the end of the day, the news on the front page has to actually attract the person who's buying the newspaper, not a young person. And I'm guessing in this room, not a lot of us. Not a lot of us will rush down to the dairy each day to buy a newspaper.
I do.
No. Yeah, Danny does. He gets given some money from me. Not a lot of us actually get our news from the newspaper. We do, a lot of us use Stuff, or we might use the New Zealand Herald's one. They've got an app as well. But they're all still getting their money from advertisers, whether they're from the apps, from the websites, or from the newspapers. In the newspaper, 20% of that paper is paid for by you when you buy it. 80% is paid for by the advertisers. You're not going to put an anti-Toyota story right next to a Toyota advertisement. It's bad for your business as a newspaper. And this goes right into media, and those of you that are not here at the moment, make sure you grab one of that from me, because we've had a few people who are sick today, and I'd really like to say, hey, thanks. It's really good practice when you email me or text me that you're unwell and you can't come to class, because that means I know where you are and I'm not going to start chasing you. But this goes right into all of that stuff. Okay, and what it will point out is, in particular, a really good example was in the United States with what's called the Monsanto scandal, when some news reporters working for Fox News found out that Monsanto had an ingredient in it that was poisoning babies. And they wanted to present this whole scandal in the newspaper, and that they lost their job because Monsanto, who they're like Fonterra for us. Monsanto saw that what was going to happen would be people would stop buying their products in supermarkets. So they instructed the supermarkets to stop advertising on Fox TV. Fox would have lost lots of money straight away. So the chief executive pulled the two reporters into the office and said to them, and I quote, "I'll tell you what the news is. The news is what I tell you the news is." This is not as bad in New Zealand, but I do really caution that actually the news in New Zealand is mainly framed for a white, middle-class male. You will see that that's where the newspapers are aimed the whole time, and that's the perspective that they will give you. So when they're talking about kids in South Auckland or kids in Cannons Creek, they're going to talk about them in a really negative light in the main. If they're going to talk about kids in private high schools, they're going to talk about them in a positive line, even if they're up to the same antics. A good example was those kids last year. We had it over the weekend actually. Wellington College, that's actually a really good example of those boys that have posted on the private messenger board about how great this, why don't you, a WC boy is a guy that gets a girl drunk and then rapes her. Yeah, okay. But you'll see that even the school and the parents will be arguing and will continue to argue is that these boys need an education rather than punishment. We really need to bring them up and inform them. But if some boy in Wainui posted something like that, the school would expel him straight away. There's just no questions there. It's we don't put up with delinquency in Wainui. but we'll put up with it in a white elite school because we actually know that we're going to lose your parents' money, and then you'll let your boy go on a rowing trip, you know, which would not happen. And I just what I was going to use as an example was last year on the same national rowing championships, when another elite high school, the boys decided to go through the conveyor belt at the airport into the private area, which is highly illegal. That ended up on the news. Now, a lot of people did, and even if the Rally High boys, people were speaking up and saying we need something to happen, But I would argue that actually where the things happen is actually for, in the main, our kids who are already marginalised, where second chances are often given. That's me going off topic. But it's really quite important to know that news media is in itself biased. News media is in itself biased. So I'll stop this. I don't trust anyone, not even myself.